Hey guys, welcome back to our third week of Primer Podcast. We are so excited for you just to continue to join us, and we are back and we're going to dive into 1 Peter 4:7 this week. The end of all things is near. Therefore, be alert and sober-minded for prayer. You know, I will say, I wouldn't have thought prayer would have been the first thing. Like, that's not the first thing that came to my mind when I thought that's where this series was going. I was thinking something totally different.
Right. It's interesting because it does feel like, on the basis of everything we've been talking about, somewhat anticlimactic is that we enter into this space of like all this work we're doing on the idols and the addictions in our heart, all the things that we're filling in this hole of holiness with, and we're sorting through, reordering, fasting, taking stock of. It doesn't seem like it's leading us to a place of prayer, but I think in many ways it's because we have kind of not a full picture of what prayer is really doing in our lives. I think that more often than not, prayer for us has become this space of obligation. Right, it's something that we do in the morning at meals, before bed. It's something that we do in church services or anytime you're starting something, and it's just this like reactionary, obligatory thing. And then the second is just that, it's reactionary. Right, prayer is this thing that we do when we find ourselves in trials and circumstances of crisis, where now, hey, I don't know what else to do, so I pray. Or we do it in moments of joy where something amazing has happened and I recognize that it's God that has done this in my life. And so I offer thanksgiving for that. And then the third thing is that we enter into prayer kind of from a wishful posture. Right, a little bit of a genie in the bottle kind of sense is that there's something that I want. And it doesn't have to be a trivial thing so much as another more significant thing in my life. But I'm praying to God to ask that my will be done in this space. And so from that perspective, prayer doesn't seem to fit the bill of sobriety and sober-mindedness that Peter's calling us to in the midst of the intoxication of our world. But I think Peter gives us a little bit of a clue as to why prayer is so important when he says the end is near. And really what he's saying there, it's not apocalyptic. It's not like, hey, there's, wars and earthquakes and storms and, the earth will end on this day that we've projected out. But instead it's saying, as you have been filled with the Spirit of God, we recognize that our priorities have changed and we no longer have any need to be focused on our earthly goals. Now we're brought into these kingdom convictions. And if that's the case, prayer becomes the only conduit to be filled with the purposes of heaven. And so we enter into this space of prayer because it is the avenue through which God fills us with His Spirit and leads us into His ways, His will, and His understanding. And so I think from that perspective, it's this really simple yet beautiful invitation that He's giving us.
Yeah, I can see that. I know I tend to think of prayer. I always feel like I'm in conversation with God, right? So, but what I tend to do when something's bothering me, when something's got that control of my mind, when I know I've put some idolize something, whether it's like I mentioned in weeks prior that I tend to go into planning mode.
Yep.
And so that's where I tend to forget to pray sometimes.
Yeah.
I actually negate that I have this God that I can go to when things are going array and I feel like there's a possibility that I feel like I need to control it. I need to figure this out. And then as soon as I do pray, I end up feeling this peace over me.
Yeah.
And because I know that that's what I should go to first is prayer, but I tend to think that I need to control it
Right.
first.
And I think idols have that impact on our life. Idols emphasize urgency, and prayer emphasizes importance. And at least in my experience in my life, urgency always wins that battle. In my heart, like what's available right there at my fingertips versus what I probably should be filling myself with. And so I think in that lane, when we are pursuing idols and when we have prioritized other things in our life as more urgent than what the kingdom of God or what God is doing in his kingdom, then we'll find that our prayer life is suppressed because we're constantly turning to these other things that are right there that I can consume. But on the other hand, when we do experience that fasting and that reordering of our lives, and suddenly, those kingdom purposes, those eternal values are pulled central, and we focus on them. Like prayer is the only natural response. It invites this prayer because the only place for me to be drawn further into those kingdom purposes is through a life of prayer. And I find also, even in the midst of my prayers, I appreciate that you said when you do come into prayer, you feel peace. I oftentimes find when I'm kind of in this space of pursuit of idols in my life or other priorities in my life that my prayers are just really distracted. That my phone buzzes and I thought, well, maybe I should check that, or an email pings and I got to go do that, or I realize that it's a certain time and I got to get food on the table or kids to school or any of these things, and so I'm constantly being pulled back out of that prayer life. But when we're able to silence and fast from some of those idols and distractions in our life, our prayer actually becomes focused, and it drives us deeper and deeper and deeper into that space of prayer. And then I think too about how often our prayers are informed by our idols as well. Like we all probably know the stories of like when we were a kid and you pray for a Christmas present or you pray for this or that, and hopefully we're not doing that now, but at some level our prayer life is always informed by the priorities in our life.
Right.
And so if we haven't been thoughtful about what those priorities are, if we haven't been faithful in what it looks like to center our life on that pure spiritual milk, those idols, those false pursuits inevitably become the foundation of our prayer life. And so what we're doing is we're praying, God, fulfill my idolatrous desires. And it's like God wants to answer our prayers, but he doesn't want to pander to our idolatry, right? And so when we enter into a space of eternal values, we shift away from urgency into a prioritization of importance. Now suddenly our prayers become informed. And so there's this multiplying effect. And I love, if you'll read actually 1 Peter 4, the couple verses right after 7. So I think 8 through 10, but I can cut you off.
Oh, yeah. So above all, maintain constant love for one another, since love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaining. Just as each one has received a gift, use it to serve others as good stewards of varied grace of God.
Yeah. And so like what I love there is it's like when we enter into that kind of prayer that recognizes the end is near, that recognizes kingdom purposes, it just pours out in every capacity of our life. In our love, in our service, in our words, in our hospitality. We ooze the Spirit of God that has taken root in the center of who we are, and it has this multiplying effect where those that are around us are experiencing that pursuit of kingdom conviction rather than that pursuit of cultural conviction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know you mentioned fasting, and so this past week I've decided to really prayerfully think about what to take away.
Yeah.
And like I said, planning was one of them. So I get my little notebook out and start planning vacation or whatever it is. So I decided to put that away, but then also scrolling through our reels on Facebook. And I've noticed already a difference in just being able to let go of that, and it centers me back to God. And then I also am more compassionate towards
Yeah.
others that are in my life, and being able to realize that I've taken away something that
Yeah.
was bad during those times. It's not that we discussed that before. These aren't bad things,
Yeah.
but they're taking away part of our relationships with our significant others or our children, but also our relationship with God.
Right.
And so, like, I think about that with the prayer. Is like it reminds me to be in more constant prayer with
Right.
God when I'm taking away something that was taking up a lot of my time
Yeah.
during the day.
That's awesome. I mean, because really what that fast is doing is it's deprogramming the immediacy and urgency of our life, and it's giving more space to the things that are important. So, to our families, to our witness, and to our prayer life. And so, as we dive into this next week and create space in our hearts, let's begin to fill that space with that conduit of God's presence, which is our prayer, and kind of lean into that. So make sure you check out our study guide below, and let that kind of guide your personal devotions or your group conversation this week. And we can't wait to see you soon.
See ya.